He didn't even notice it happen. It was a Tuesday afternoon. He stood in line at a small coffee shop, scrolling through old messages on his phone, the kind filled with heart emojis, late-night confessions, and promises no one kept. The barista called his name, but he didn't hear it. His mind was still with her, still replaying the last conversation, still wondering how something that once felt like destiny now felt like distance. He used to be a man with a morning routine, a vision, a sense of self. Now, he measured his worth by whether she texted back. And here's the thing, he wasn't weak. He wasn't desperate. He was just lost. Not in the world, but in love. Or at least what he thought love was. If you've ever felt that, if you've ever given so much of yourself that you started fading from your own life, then this video is for you. Because real love shouldn't feel like losing your voice in someone else's song. It shouldn't be confusion dressed as chemistry or sacrifice disguised as connection. And yet, that's exactly where so many of us end up, trying to be enough for someone, instead of already being whole within ourselves. But the ancient Stoics, they saw love differently. They didn't chase. They didn't beg. They loved with their eyes open, their hearts anchored, and their minds clear. To them, love wasn't about possession. It was about presence. Not about needing someone to complete you, but choosing to walk beside them, whole and steady. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And if our thoughts are clouded with illusion, obsession, and fear, then love becomes a storm, not a sanctuary. So in this video, we're going to take a different path. We'll explore 5 Stoic tactics that won't just transform your relationship, but will return you to yourself. These are not tricks, not emotional leverage. They are practices rooted in virtue, presence, and inner clarity. The kind of love that doesn't need to control or cling. The kind that doesn't fall apart when the other person leaves, because it was never built on illusion to begin with. And if that kind of depth speaks to you, if you're tired of shallow advice, tired of begging for breadcrumbs, tired of losing yourself in the name of love, then you've come to the right place. This is Stoic Now, where we don't chase love. We become the kind of people who can carry it with strength. If you find truth here, subscribe, like, share this with someone who needs to come home to themselves again. Now take a breath. We're about to begin. Love with clarity, not fantasy. She was everything he thought he wanted. Elegant, articulate, deep in ways he couldn't quite explain. They met at a friend's gathering, talked about art and ambition, and by the second date, he was already imagining what their kids might look like. She didn't just light up the room. She lit up the emptiness inside him. Or so he believed. But 3 months later, he wasn't smiling anymore. He was second-guessing himself, censoring his opinions, shrinking. And somehow, in his quest to be everything she needed, he became nothing he recognized. That's the danger of fantasy. It's seductive. It flatters our hope. It gives us the illusion of certainty in a world that refuses to be tamed. But fantasy, when left unchecked, blinds us. It keeps us from seeing people as they truly are, and worse, from seeing ourselves as we truly are. The Stoics knew this all too well. Epictetus warned us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. And in love, that means having the courage to drop the illusion, even when it makes you feel foolish. To see with unfiltered eyes. To admit that maybe, just maybe, you didn't fall in love with a person. You fell in love with your projection of them. So how do we escape that trap? We begin by observing, not assuming. The next time you're in a relationship or even drawn to someone, try this exercise. Grab a journal and divide the page in 2 columns. On the left, write down everything you believe about the person. They're thoughtful. They're deep. They understand me. Then on the right, write down only what you've seen with your own eyes. Not what they said, not what they promised, but what they've proven through consistent behavior. You'll be surprised. Often, what we think we love is more idea than evidence. We love their potential. We love the image they showed us in the first 2 weeks. We love what they might become, not what they're showing us right now. But clarity is love's truest ally. Because once you see clearly, you can choose wisely. You stop trying to save someone who doesn't want saving. You stop holding space for a version of them that never existed. And most importantly, you stop betraying yourself just to keep a fantasy alive. I once knew a man, let's call him Andrew. He met a woman at a meditation retreat. She seemed soulful, intentional, emotionally intelligent. She talked about inner peace and healing. Andrew thought, finally, someone who gets it. But a few months in, the cracks appeared. She was dismissive, controlling, passive-aggressive when he disagreed. Still, he clung to the image of her from that first week, the woman who spoke like a sage and smiled like a mystic. He didn't want to see the truth, because it meant admitting he was wrong. And like most of us, Andrew didn't want to feel foolish. He wanted the story to end like a dream, not with an awakening. But the Stoics would argue, awakening is the real dream. It's what happens when you trade illusion for truth. When you stop asking, how can I make this work? And start asking, what is actually here? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if someone can show me I'm mistaken, I'll gladly change my ways. For it is the truth I seek. This is the discipline of clarity. It's not romantic in the Hollywood sense. It won't make for a poetic Instagram caption, but it will set you free. Because once you see clearly, the fog lifts. You're no longer at the mercy of your own longing. You don't fall in love with potential. You walk beside reality. And real love, built on truth, not fantasy, becomes something unshakable. So ask yourself, with tenderness and courage, do I love who they are, or who I hope they'll become? That question alone might just save your heart. Master emotional temperance. It started with one small comment. He left the dishes in the sink. She rolled her eyes and muttered, "You never think of anyone but yourself." That was all. Just a passing jab. But it hit something raw in him. A bruise from a childhood filled with accusations he couldn't defend against. Before he could think, he snapped back, louder than he meant to. Her face changed. The energy shifted. And just like that, something beautiful between them fractured. This wasn't about dishes or disrespect. It was about emotion, unfiltered, unmastered, and unleashed. In that moment, he didn't choose his reaction. His reaction chose him. This is where most love stories begin to fall apart. Not with betrayal or loss, but with a slow erosion of emotional discipline. One outburst at a time, one silent resentment after another. But the Stoics offered a different way. They didn't believe in suppressing emotions. That's a common misconception. They believed in temperance, emotional strength, not silence. Restraint, not repression. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When we allow our emotions to control our behavior, we lose more than arguments. We lose our ability to love with clarity. Passion without control becomes chaos. Intimacy without regulation becomes injury. So how do we practice emotional temperance in love? Start with the pause. There's a moment, however brief, between trigger and response. And in that sliver of time, we hold the power to change everything. The Stoics trained for this moment. They rehearsed their values daily, not just to seem wise, but to be unmoved by emotional storms. One method I've taught and practiced for years is simple. Pause. Breathe. Respond. When you feel that familiar heat rising, when you're about to say something sharp, or withdraw into cold silence, pause. Inhale slowly, count to 5. Don't speak until your breath has traveled fully in and fully out. Why? Because the breath reminds you of what's truly yours, your response. Not the insult, not the tension, just your reaction. Temperance means choosing truth over impulse. It's standing inside your own fire without letting it burn others. I once coached a woman named Elisa. Her partner struggled with emotional availability. Every time he pulled away, she panicked, sending long texts, over-explaining, begging for closeness. She hated this cycle, but couldn't stop herself. Until one day, she didn't react. He canceled dinner. Instead of accusing or pleading, she paused. She wrote nothing. She just breathed. And in that stillness, she saw clearly. She wasn't reacting to him. She was reacting to a wound from years ago. A father who left. A belief that silence meant abandonment. That's the wisdom the Stoics understood. Every emotional storm has roots beneath the surface. We aren't just upset in the present. We're haunted by the past. But we are not prisoners of those ghosts. Elisa eventually spoke her truth. Not in anger, not in fear, but with strength. She didn't need to yell to be heard. She didn't need to threaten or cry. Her calmness became her power. And he listened. This is emotional temperance, not emotional absence. Not the cold shoulder, but the ability to sit with discomfort, observe it, and respond from your highest self, not your oldest wound. Seneca wrote, No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. And where better to practice this than in love, where adversity often shows up as the person we trust the most challenging our peace. So next time conflict arises, ask yourself, is this anger useful? Is this response rooted in clarity or just survival? When love is tested, your emotional tone becomes your compass. And those who learn to temper their fire build relationships that can endure any storm. Choose to lead with virtue, not validation. She adjusted her laughter for him. At first, it was subtle. He'd make a sarcastic joke that grazed the edge of cruelty, and though it made her wince inside, she laughed, just enough to keep things smooth. Then came the opinions. His favorite books became hers. His favorite music, suddenly, not so bad. She even softened her wardrobe, less bold colors, less edge. She told herself it was compromise. It was love. But somewhere in that slow surrender, she crossed a quiet line. She wasn't leading with virtue. She was living for validation. And when the relationship eventually collapsed, when his interest waned, when he moved on, what hurt the most wasn't the breakup. It was the realization that she had forgotten how to be herself. This is the quiet tragedy of conditional love. The moment we abandon our truth just to be loved, we are no longer loving. We're performing. The Stoics warned us of this. They believed that the highest love we could offer the world, and ourselves, was one rooted in virtue, not approval, not praise, not attention, but in the disciplined choice to remain in alignment with our core values. Seneca wrote, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." And what is more unconquerable than a heart that loves without losing itself? In our relationships, it's tempting to slip into roles, especially when we're afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid we're not enough. Afraid that if we show our full, untamed self, we won't be chosen. But the truth is, the moment we chase love to feel complete, we start bleeding parts of ourselves just to feel accepted. And what starts as sacrifice often ends as resentment. So how do we shift? How do we move from this hunger for validation to the steadiness of virtue? We begin by asking the harder questions. Am I showing up in this relationship as who I really am, or who I think they'll like? Do I shape my beliefs around their approval or around my values? This isn't about arrogance. It's about alignment. I once worked with a man, David, who confessed that in every relationship, he became a different version of himself. When he dated an artist, he pretended to love poetry. With a corporate highflyer, he played the ambition game. He could morph, adapt, survive, but never thrive. One day, after yet another breakup, he looked at me and said, "I don't know what I actually believe anymore." That was the turning point. Together, we started identifying his values, not the ones he picked up from partners, but the ones that were his. Integrity, patience, freedom of expression. When the next relationship came, he held those values close. He didn't waver to avoid conflict. He didn't apologize for his truth. And the result? He lost some connections quickly, but the one that stayed? It stayed with depth. Because he wasn't offering a performance, he was offering presence. To love from virtue is to walk into a relationship whole. You don't demand they validate your worth, because your worth is already held in the way you speak, act, and carry yourself. You don't become smaller to fit inside their world. You invite them into yours with clarity and calm. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. In love, don't argue your value. Embody it. Be the calm when things get chaotic. Be the honesty when things get confusing. Be the steadiness when emotions flare. And when someone asks, why aren't you trying harder to win them back? You'll smile gently and say, because I never left myself." That is not cold. That is clarity. That is not ego. That is virtue. And the heart that leads from virtue may not be loud, but it is unforgettable. Accept that pain is part of the path. It was the quiet after the door closed that hurt the most. Not the goodbye itself. Not even the weeks of arguments leading up to it. But that silence, the kind that echoes. The kind that fills the room where laughter used to live. She sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the dent his body left in the pillow. And for the first time in years, she had no one to text, no plans to make, no illusion left to cling to. Just pain. Raw, cold, undeniable. And yet, it was in that moment, when the distraction vanished and the heart was naked, that something deeper began to speak. Not through words, but through presence. Through the sheer unfiltered truth of this is what's real now. Most of us spend our lives trying to outrun this feeling. The ache, the heartbreak, the nights when our chest feels too tight to breathe. But the Stoics, those ancient seekers of inner peace, taught something far more radical. They didn't see pain as a problem. They saw it as a path. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "To love only what happens, what was destined. No greater harmony." That includes the losses, the ruptures, the long, lonely nights where we're forced to meet the parts of ourselves we tried to hide behind someone else's love. Love, when real, is not a promise of forever. It's a mirror, one that reflects not just who they are, but who you are in their presence. And sometimes, that mirror cracks, and it hurts. But as Seneca reminds us, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. You may not realize it now, but the pain you're feeling could be your invitation back to yourself. There's something strange that happens in grief. At first, we resist. We replay every memory, every text, every what if. We try to patch the past together into something coherent. But eventually, if we're quiet enough, we hear a deeper question whisper through the ache. Now that you are alone, who are you willing to become? Pain has a way of stripping the noise. It humbles the ego. It brings us face to face with the illusions we clung to. That love should be easy. That if they left, it means we're not enough. That healing should be quick and clean. But love was never meant to shield us from pain. It was meant to reveal it. I once knew a man who was engaged to the love of his life. Or so he thought. She ended it abruptly. No betrayal, no big drama, just a quiet truth. She no longer saw the future the same way. He was crushed. He tried everything. Letters, flowers, waiting outside her apartment. Nothing worked. For months he walked through his days like a ghost. But then, slowly, he began to rebuild, not by numbing out, but by leaning in. He returned to journaling, to long walks, to reading the Stoics. He wrote down what hurt and why, what he feared and what he learned. And one day he told me something I'll never forget. Losing her showed me the parts of myself I abandoned trying to keep her. That's the alchemy of pain. It doesn't just break us. It remakes us, if we let it. The Stoics would urge you, don't run from heartbreak. Sit with it. Learn from it. Let it carve you into someone stronger, softer, and more awake. Every scar you carry is not a failure. It's a passage, a proof that you loved with an open heart. And if love brought pain, it also brought the capacity to feel, to care, to grow. As Epictetus said, suffering arises from trying to control what is uncontrollable. So instead of asking, why did they leave? Ask, what is this trying to teach me? Because when pain becomes teacher, not enemy, you don't just survive love's ending. You rise from it transformed. Detach without abandoning. He used to check her location 5 times a day, not because she asked him to, not even because he didn't trust her, but because a part of him, the part wounded long before she ever arrived, needed the illusion of control. Every time her blue dot moved without explanation, his heart would race. He imagined worst-case scenarios, rehearsed confrontations, composed texts he never sent. What he couldn't admit was this: he wasn't loving her. He was trying to possess her. And nothing strangles love faster than the need to own it. We've all been there in one way or another, gripping too tightly, fearing their distance, panicking at every sign of change. We confuse intensity with intimacy, but the Stoics knew better. They taught us that to love deeply, you must also love freely. Epictetus said it simply: never say about anything, I lost it. Say only, I gave it back. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you stop clinging to what was never yours to control. You stop confusing love with attachment. You learn to hold with open hands, not clenched fists. This is the paradox of Stoic love. The more you let go, the more space love has to grow. Detachment isn't distance. It's presence without possession. It's loving someone for who they are, not for how they make you feel about yourself. It's understanding that their choices are theirs, and yours are yours, and that any love worth keeping does not require captivity. Think of it like this: when you grip sand too tightly in your fist, it slips through your fingers. But when you hold it gently, it stays. Detachment is that gentle hold. I once worked with a couple, Sarah and Joel. Sarah was independent, a free spirit. Joel, on the other hand, needed constant reassurance. He'd text 10 times a day, ask about every male friend, subtly try to influence how she dressed, where she went, what she shared online. Eventually, she told him, "I feel more like a possession than a partner." He was crushed. He said, "But I just love you so much." She replied, "Then let me breathe." And that moment cracked something open in him. Together, we explored what it meant to love without fear. We talked about how his grip was born from childhood insecurity, not malice. How his need for constant affirmation wasn't her burden to carry. He began journaling, meditating, reflecting. He practiced asking himself, "Am I responding with fear or with freedom?" Slowly, the grip loosened, and something beautiful happened. Sarah came closer, not because he demanded it, but because she chose to. That's the heart of detachment. Choice. You love not because you need someone, but because you choose to love them every day. And if they walk away, you grieve, yes. You cry, but you don't crumble. Because your identity is not built on their presence, it's built on your own. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, receive without pride. Let go without attachment. The people we love are not extensions of our ego. They are not props in our life story. They are fellow travelers. Some will stay, some will go, but your peace, your soul, must not be chained to their decisions. So ask yourself this, gently but honestly. Am I trying to love this person, or am I trying to keep them? Because one comes from wholeness. The other comes from fear. When you release the need to own, you discover the freedom to love purely. And that's the love that lasts. Not because it's trapped, but because it's chosen again and again, without pressure, without control, without fear. That is Stoic love. That is your power. So here we are, not at the end of a video, but perhaps the beginning of a different way of loving. One not built on fantasy, but on clarity. One that doesn't collapse under the weight of emotional chaos, but breathes through temperance. One that doesn't chase validation, but leads with virtue. That sees pain not as a punishment, but as part of the path. And finally, one that knows how to let go without ever letting love die. These are the 5 Stoic tactics. Not theories, not trends, but practices, disciplines of the heart and mind that can hold space for real love to rise. The kind that doesn't demand fireworks or perfection, but truth. The kind that whispers in the quiet moments, "I see you, as you are, and I remain rooted in myself, whether you stay or go." Because what the Stoics understood, what so many forget, is that love is not for the fragile ego. It's not for the shapeshifter, the approval seeker, or the one who fears loss more than they value truth. No, love, real love, is for the disciplined, the present, the courageous, the whole. Maybe this journey stirred something in you. Maybe you recognized a pattern you've been repeating, a part of yourself you've silenced, or a kind of love you've never given yourself permission to receive. If so, honor that. Take a walk tonight and ask yourself, not what kind of partner you want, but what kind of person you are when you love. Not what you need from them, but what you are willing to give from a place of strength, not scarcity. Because here's the truth no one tells you. You don't have to be chosen to be valuable. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. And you don't have to hold on tightly to prove you care. You are allowed to love deeply and still walk away when it costs you your peace. You are allowed to feel pain and still keep your dignity intact. You are allowed to open your heart without letting it be a revolving door for those who don't honor it. And if you do the work, if you show up with virtue, with clarity, with restraint, with courage, then your love will speak for itself. Quietly, powerfully, without performance. Seneca said, "True happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future." And that, too, is how love flourishes, not in control, but in presence, not in fear, but in stillness. If this video gave you something, an insight, a question, a breath of relief, I invite you to carry it forward. Share it, reflect on it, and if you feel called, leave a comment. Tell me what part of this spoke to you, what you're letting go of, what you're beginning again. And if you want more reflections like this, more soul-deep conversation, more ancient wisdom from modern struggles, subscribe to Stoic now. This space isn't just a channel. It's a quiet corner of the internet where we remember who we are. I'll leave you with this. Love, at its strongest, isn't loud. It's steady. It doesn't demand. It offers. It doesn't lose itself. It reveals the self. So may your love be clear. May your soul stay anchored. And may you never again confuse attachment for connection. I'll see you in the next one.